Congressman. Yeah, please. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Very glad to be here. Very happy to be back with our friends from San Antonio, and so pleased to join the National Immigration Forum in presenting this conversation about where we stand on this very important issue. I am indeed Evan Smith of the Texas Tribune, and I'm extremely happy to introduce our panelists. We're going to have a conversation of about 40 minutes or so. You'll notice there are microphones in the two aisles, one to the left, one to the right. When it comes time to take questions from the audience, we'll ask that you line up behind those microphones. We'll take as many questions as our time permits. It is my pleasure to introduce in a little bit more detail this afternoon's guests, United States Representatives Luis Gutierrez and John Carter. Congressman Gutierrez is a Democrat in his 11th term representing Illinois' 4th District, as he says, the heart of Chicago. The first Latino elected to Congress from the Midwest. He's been front and center on the issue of immigration reform, chairing the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Immigration Task Force, and giving up his place as a high-ranking member on the Financial Services Committee to serve on the Judiciary Committee, which has jurisdiction over immigration. A native of Chicago, Congressman Gutierrez has an undergraduate degree from Northeastern Illinois University. He served on the Chicago City Council before his election to the U.S. House. Congressman John Carter, a Republican, is in his 6th term representing Texas's 31st District, which extends from just west of Killeen to just east of Taylor, from just south of Round Rock to just north of Temple. It is literally bifurcated by Interstate Highway 35. He chairs the Homeland Security Subcommittee of the Committee on Appropriations and is vice chair of the Military Construction and Veteran Affairs Subcommittee. Previously, he served for more than 20 years as a district court judge in Williamson County, the first Republican ever elected county-wide in Williamson County. Born in Houston, Congressman Carter has an undergraduate degree from Texas Tech University and a law degree from the University of Texas at Austin. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Luis Gutierrez and John Carter. Gentlemen, very nice to have you here. Congressman, welcome to Texas. Good to see you back home, Congressman. Let me ask each of you, to Eddie's point about the Senate's action so far on immigration reform. We've yet to hear from the House. Hopefully you'll preview for us what the House is going to put forward. I want you to tell us about the Senate bill, how you feel about it. Good bill or a bad bill? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Congressman Gutierrez, you're our guest. Let me ask you to go first.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me thank you and Texas Tribune for moderating this wonderful program here this afternoon. I want to say it's good to be back in San Antonio with my friend Eddie Aldrete. I know that he called me and he's working with Ali Noorani and the National Immigration Forum, putting this wonderful event together. And I want to say to Mr. Nixon over at IBC, thank you for all of the wonderful work that you're doing, and to all of the other wonderful people. Look, I think the Senate is headed in the right direction. I think they have a balance of what's good for business, what's good in terms of internal security and border security, and a pathway, a secure pathway to legalization and ultimately citizenship for those who opt. We cannot legislate loyalty and fidelity to the United States of America. We cannot legislate and say, and you will become a citizen. We must, however, I believe, have an opportunity to reach that, or create in America a permanent underclass of workers that are different than the rest of us. And that would not be in the best and greatest tradition of immigration tradition here in the United States of America. So I think they're headed in the right direction. I want to say that I feel very lucky and very privileged to have a partner in Congressman John Carter, with whom I am able to work in addressing the broken immigration system. We really didn't know each other that well, but you get locked up in a room enough hours and share enough meals that you become friends, you get to know your idiosyncrasies and who we are, and the good and the bad times during the conversations and the negotiations. But we never leave the room, and we always understand that it's our responsibility. So I feel like, look, my mom and dad, they came here from Puerto Rico in 1952, and I know some people say, but they came as citizens. Well, if you ask them, they're going to tell you they came as immigrants. Because A, they didn't speak English. B, they came to a hostile environment in Chicago. I remember this is before the 1960s and civil rights laws. And that's where they came to Chicago. And they came to Chicago, and they toiled, and they sweated. And you know something? I think they did a pretty good job. They always worked. They always contributed. They sent me to the best schools that they could send me to. And one day, in the finest of American traditions, I got to the Congress of the United States. So that's the perspective from which I come. And I look at power and yielding power and say to myself, wow, what a privilege. Some people see power and think, what is it? It's really a privilege. And you should always use that privilege to help others. So I am lucky to be in the Congress of the United States, and I am so fortunate that my friend and my colleague, John Carter, has accepted the invitation to share this stage. I feel honored that he's here with me this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congressman Gutierrez says that the Senate bill is a good start. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's a good start. Let me first start by thanking everybody for being here. I want to thank my friend Luis. He invited me because they said, what Republican you want to pick on the stage? And he said, I can't think of one even better than Judge Carter. So, it's a funny thing. You go in with preconceived ideas about people, which the division in the Congress, that's a bad part of the division in Congress, because you don't really get to know people. But as my colleague tells you, when you're locked in the same room, and you came in with a concept of if the far left and the far right, which quite honestly is what our group's made up of, can come to a compromise, then it ought to be easy for the rest of the Congress who vary in that area to come to a compromise. So we're as far apart politically as you can get, but we're very close right now because of what this project we're working on.
Yeah.
We're very proud of the product we're moving forward right now. We feel like we're going to have a product that's going to be a product that can pass the Congress. You know, when you do this, you need to fix the problem, but you need to also make sure you get 218 votes in the House and you pass and you get 60 in the Senate. So that's part of what our negotiations are. And it's been a great experience, an awesome experience. In examining the Senate bill, I agree exactly what my colleague said. It's a good start. It's a good, the thoughts are in the right direction.
Yeah.
I would argue that they haven't touched all the bases they should touch, but they're definitely going in the right direction.
Name some of the bases they haven't touched, Congressman.
They're going to have a hard time getting past the fairly sizable group of people in this country who are saying you're giving them something for breaking our laws in this country without any consequences. That's going to be there's an awful lot of people they're not against the immigrants, they're against the law breaking.
Is the something, Congressman, often it's described by opponents of immigration reform as amnesty? Do you go so far as to say that this bill offers amnesty?
I'm sure they would argue it doesn't, but yeah, I think in the definition that's out there in the general public, that awarding citizenship without really any consequences is amnesty.
Right.
Now, there's various views of that, and others disagree.
Right.
What's wrong with the word amnesty is there's an awful lot of disagreement on what it means.
Right.
I come from a background, I'm an old trial judge.
Right.
I believe that the rule of law is the glue that holds the American society together. And whenever we violate the rule of law or move away from letting the rule of law govern our lives, then we are basically giving up the real sovereignty the sovereignty of the American people lies not in parties nor in people. It lies in the law. It lies in our Constitution, which is our basis of our law, and the laws that go along with it.
Right.
And so the rule of law is very, very important to keeping our society together and having us have a level playing field to operate on. So from that standpoint, there are those that make a valid argument against anything that doesn't have some consequence.
Yep.
We can't go into the details of our bill right yet because, quite honestly, we made a promise and we've kept it.
Yes, we have.
And let me tell you, that may not seem hard in San Antonio, Texas, but in Washington, D.C.,
It is hard.
give me a break. That
Right.
place has no secrets.
But Congressman, you can talk about the general principles, and I hope we'll come back to the general principles in a second. You mentioned something you don't like about the Senate bill before I give Congressman Gutierrez way back in here. Tell me something about the Senate bill that you do like. Tell me an aspect of it that you do think this is the right direction.
They're looking at a guest worker program, which I don't think anybody that's thinking logically doesn't realize we need a guest worker program. I come from Texas. I'm born and raised, lived here all my life.
Right.
I know the economy of our state. I know the great things that have happened with NAFTA and all our relationship with our neighbors to the south. And you know, I'm all for a guest worker program, a very large, expanded guest worker program, because I believe, honestly and truly, we have an awful lot of jobs that we need filled.
Right. Congressman, would you characterize what the Senate is proposing as amnesty, as some have? And I think, as Congressman Carter says correctly, definitions differ between people, right?
Well, first of all, I think you got to get right with the law. And that's what the Senate version allows you. It allows people to come out of the shadows, register with the government. What does that mean? That means putting your fingerprints before a federal agency and going through a background check. And if you pass that background check and you're good, right, then you get a work permit. But then you've got to go pay a fine, and then you've got to go take English classes, and then you got to go make sure you're right with the IRS, and you have a period of time to do those things. So I think there are consequences to the action. The difference is that there is a direct correlation between what you did and the violation of the law and the consequences and the penalty you pay. Up to now, it's been 1.6 million people deported during the last 4 years.
Right.
Today, this government will deport 1,200 people. There will be 200 to 300 American citizen children without a mom or a dad. Those shouldn't be the consequences of the action of someone coming to this country doing nothing different than what my mom and dad did 50 years ago, coming here because there was no hope for them where they were at and looking for a better opportunity. And I think we should distinguish between foreigners, that is, those that aren't from this country that come here, and immigrants. Immigrants come to work hard, sweat, and toil, and they contribute. Not all foreigners are immigrants. And so I think we're going to focus on those that have made a contribution, continue to make a contribution. I would like to say that I will share a secret from our conversations with
Congressman
Let me
sit up
Carter.
and listen to this. Go ahead.
And that is that I remember one time sitting there as we were talking, and we were talking about the guest worker program. And I remember how my heart just was soared for a moment. Because here was the conservative Republican from Texas talking about we will never have another bracero program. That is something that we cannot tolerate in modern American history. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a man who has values.
Someone you can work with.
Somebody that I can work with, because that's usually something that I would expect me or someone other to say. And so sometimes you walk into a room with conceived notions, right? And I said, well, can he really be? And he is. And so I just wanted to say that, and I think that's important as we continue to develop. We cannot have, we're going to have a guest worker program, but we're not going to have another bracero program that comes and exploits and strips people of their basic human dignity and their rights again in America. That's not the immigration policy of the future.
That you want.
That's right.
Congressman, your colleague here pushes back a little bit on the idea that this is amnesty, says there are consequences. They may not be the consequence everybody wants, but it is not completely without consequences that somebody might ultimately be able to remain in this country. What consequences would you prefer to see, if not the ones that Congressman Gutierrez is discussing?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. That's part of the big secret, huh?
Yeah. We start off with a different concept, and I just, Luis knows this. When the day I walked in the room 3.5 years ago and said, look, I come here for two purposes. I want the rule of law to prevail in the United States, but I understand we're talking about human beings, and we've got to have compassion for the human beings we're dealing with.
Right, compassion.
And so we have to do compassionate work.
Right.
We can't split up families. We have to think logically. We have to take the heat when somebody doesn't like something because we're doing something that's right for human beings. Right. But in turn, I also believe that that there are consequences that the American people are not the hardcore people who say, wait a minute, they broke a series of laws, and there's no consequence there. Nobody's saying you did wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into it, but I came up with a concept. I think it works. I think my colleagues agrees it works. It's not as easy as the Senate side, but it's not as bad as everybody might think it is.
And it's not without compassion.
But it has compassion.
Right.
It allows people to be human beings, to
Right.
live a normal life, to have a job, to take care of their family, to pay their taxes,
Right.
to obey the law, and go about their lives.
And I think enforcing the law is also about justice, right? And what are the consequences of the actions? And so we're looking to fix our broken immigration system, and that there be justice, that there be a fairness. Look, if I don't put enough money in the meter, you know, they put a ticket on my car. They don't take my car away from me. You know, if I'm late on my house payment, they don't come and take my house away. They give me a penalty. If I'm late on my credit card, there's penalties. There should be a penalty. But the penalties that we're talking about, and let me just read it, 1,200 people today, and it's going to happen every day until we fix this broken immigration system. And lastly, I'd like to say, there are going to be things that I accept as part of our bipartisanship that I wouldn't have come up with, that I wouldn't have suggested. But that I have to understand that this is not a, you know, just because on November 6th, I think the American people voted for comprehensive immigration reform and reelected Barack Obama on the basis of comprehensive immigration reform. Now, I believe that. Now, I don't want to get partisan, but I believe that. But that doesn't mean that John Carter said, oh, you won, here's a pad of paper, Luis, and a pen, why don't you write it?
Right.
Comprehensive immigration reform, and then I'll get it passed.
It's compromise.
There are going to be things that people in this room are going to go, Luis, agree to that? Yes. We have to stop the deportations. We have to keep our families together.
Right.
And shame on us if we allow it to continue to happen because we can't reach a compromise between Republicans and Democrats.
Let me say something.
Yes, sir.
That is exactly the position this man takes in the room, and I'm real proud of him for it.
Not just public, but private.
Yeah, and that's what it takes to get liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans to go to the table and fix this issue.
Right.
And that's why I think the rest of our colleagues can take a look at it and they can find a place. Is everything in there I like?
Right.
No.
But something for everybody.
Is everything that Luis likes? No.
Right.
But and one of the reasons why we believe in the comprehensive immigration plan, and this is, I went into this originally 5 years ago saying I'd like to do it in parts. Then I realized that I may be negotiating with my Democratic colleagues over here, and they're willing to yield in the part that has to do with the start,
Right.
if I'm willing to yield in numbers and other things to do with the finish.
Yeah.
Now, if we pass this bill, they have no, there's no trust
Right.
for sure, because every bill is at the mercy of the
So you have to do it all together.
So but when we put a big bill together, our compromises are not in the same section.
Right.
They can be, we varied between sections.
Right.
Because the bill is sectionalized.
Right. Congressman, let me ask you, you've mentioned the deportations a couple different times. Am I correct that your president, who was reelected, as you correctly say, on November 6th, has actually been responsible for more deportations in his first 4 years than the previous president, President Bush, a Republican, was responsible for in the previous 4 years?
That's why I tell you this is not a partisan issue.
Yeah.
1,600,000 across the community.
Yeah. Is he wrong? Was he wrong those 4 years?
I have, not only do I suggest he was wrong, the Hispanic Congressional Caucus and every major Latino organization and immigrant organization across this country suggested that he was wrong. And indeed, the president came to El Paso in early 2011, said, I can't do this by myself. He said, I'm not a dictator. I don't have this discretion, he said. Congress has to pass a law and give me that power. That's what he said. And he went all across this country. Now look, I don't look forward to going before the White House to a president that I was the first member of the Hispanic Congressional Caucus, and for a long time, the only Latino, all the rest of them were with Hillary. I was with Barack Obama.
Right.
And he and I made an agreement that we would work together to bring about comprehensive immigration reform. And I just suggest the following. I was arrested twice in front of the White House in actions of civil disobedience. Ali was with me. I was really proud that he was with me, and I was confident in taking the action because Ali Noorani and others were with me doing that. Listen, I can tell you one thing. I love this president. No one worked harder than me to re-elect this president of the United States. But I got to tell you, we kept going and we kept going. And I remember at the White House, next thing I noticed, there's Eva Longoria from Desperate Housewives and a group of actors out there saying, oh, the president can't do anything. And we said, yes, he can. I remember going to National Council La Raza, and he said, oh, I can't do it. And I remember the students and the people, not exactly a rebellious crowd at National Council La Raza, right? Radicals, you know? But they were all chanting back to the president, yes, you can. And finally, in June of 2012, right, he signed an executive order saying he will stop the deportation of all immigrant youth. And that was called DACA. And today there are 500,000 plus immigrant youth who a year ago were undocumented and subject to deportation, who today are free of deportation. And now it's up to John Carter and me to finish the work so that their moms and dads aren't subject to that same deportation.
Excellent. Congressman, I know that you have been a big advocate for the border security portion of immigration reform. You're strong on border security. I mean, what Congressman says is true. President's deported more folks in the last 4 years than his predecessor did. Net migrations from Mexico is, you know, far down. I mean, you could be forgiven from looking at those two sets of stats and saying, problem solved. You know, there's not really a border security issue. We're sending people back in record numbers. We're not really seeing a lot of people crossing. What border security work would you still like to see done in view of those statistics?
Well, the only way we're actually going to defend our borders is we're going to have to set up, and I'm supporting E-Verify.
Yeah.
Our work will support E-Verify, fully implementing E-Verify, so that we will be basically running E-Verify on anybody that applies for a job. Mm-hmm. And the whole purpose behind that is to make sure that the employer knows that he has done everything legally within his power to make sure he's done proper hiring.
You satisfied that the database is adequately clean? So
it has to be made clean.
Because you remember, Congressman, in Texas, in the legislative session of 2011, there was controversy over E-Verify on that very point,
and
that it was not adequately clean.
Yes. You know, it's not fixed.
Yeah.
It started.
Right.
We've got to make it right, but it has to be right.
Right.
If one of these people out here hires somebody, they should have no risk. Our government should be operate in such an efficient manner. There's no risk to the employer if he follows the rules. Right. And the employee, if he's got the legal right to work in this country, there should be no risk to him to apply for a job anywhere he wants to apply for a job.
Right. Okay, so E-Verify is another component.
And that's as big a part of border security on economic crossings as there is. None of this we're doing is doing anything but deal with economic crossings.
So no more boots on the ground. It's not a boots on the ground.
We're going to have boots on the ground because we got people bringing major illegal product into this country. Yes. We have people that are slaughtering folks on the other side of the border. We can't afford not to defend our borders from the unlawful behavior. Right. But on the economic crossings, our economy has slowed it down. That's part of what slowed it down right now. Yeah. The effort that's been done by DHS has helped. But I grew up here. Yeah. I've watched cattle water in the Rio Grande, hunting deer. You know, we got a river. They don't have a river in the rest of this border. Yeah. And it's miserable. They got some barbed wire fences that wouldn't hold anybody.
So there will be additional boots on the ground as part of anything that passes.
We still have to protect our border.
Congress, what do you think about that?
Let me just say, look, we are going to have we're going to have border security and we're going to have internal security. What is E-Verify? It says that if you're an American, you're in America, and you got an American business, you're in the United States of America, the federal government's going to certify that that worker is eligible to work in the United States of America. I've always been, if people would only understand that I am a major sponsor of comprehensive immigration reform and immigrant rights for over 2 decades. But here's what I believe. I believe that we need a system that guarantees that Americans, those of us born here in the United States of America, get the first crack and guarantee any job created in America. There's nothing wrong with saying that. That should be a fundamental, basic rule of law. Having said that, there are plenty of other jobs. And we need a vibrant immigration system to keep our economy strong. We need to continue to bring workers into America. We go without filling tens of thousands of high-tech jobs every year. If you were to go, and I invite anybody,
Yeah.
right? Look at the salad that you just ate here at lunch today. Who do you think picked that lettuce and those tomatoes? If you drink a glass of Chardonnay, who do you think picked those grapes? Who do you think picked that strawberry? Who do you think cans the food that you eat? You all know who does it. You all get to a bedroom in a nice hotel, and you see Maria leaving the room. You don't give two hoots whether or not she has papers. All you would consider is if that room is nice and clean and ready for you to go to sleep at. You know who's going to pick up the dishes and who's going to wash them. You know who does a series of jobs. And you can go and see who picks in Salinas, California, or in the citrus groves, or go to the Apple in Oregon and Washington states. And it is immigrants doing the dirty, backbreaking work in our agricultural system. And let me just say, economy, a lot of talk has been the uncertainty of federal regulation doesn't allow business to prosper and grow, and they don't know what decisions to make. Well, think of 11 million people and the uncertainty when they have a system that has just deported 1.6 million people. Let me tell you, you live in certainty of fear when 1.6 million people are deported. 11 million people, you register them with the law. They begin to pay taxes. They get a Social Security card. They get a driver's license. You know what the next thing they do? They open a bank account. And after they open a bank account, they buy that house. They buy that car. And when they buy that house and they buy that car, they become an economic engine that gives jobs and allows all of us to prosper. Let's not put them on the sidelines. On the sidelines, they're not doing that much good to all of us in America.
right.
Let's bring them in and make them part of who we are.
Congressman Gutierrez makes a very strong argument for immigration reform on the basis of the economy. Former U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Tony Garza, Republican, longtime Texas state official, somebody I suspect you know, has made a similar version of this argument in favor of immigration reform, that it is really an economic argument at bottom. You agree with that?
It is an economic argument.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the whole thing.
Right.
It's very emotional to some, but the reality is it's an economic argument. Our economy depends upon a workforce.
Yep.
We have the change in demographics in this country is something we have to be concerned about.
Yep.
And we need a vibrant workforce. We've always depended upon new folks for vibrant workforces.
Yep.
It's just that we've had an overwhelming resaturation of people coming across without papers, without following the rules.
Yep.
Mainly because the rules are too damn hard to follow, okay? If there's anything wrong with this system, is as we look at the legal immigration,
Yep.
it's broken, folks.
Yep.
It's broken. Why in the world, right now, as this graduating class this May of PhDs in electrical engineering, we've got studies that show in the top 25 engineering schools in this country, 98% of the people that graduate with a PhD in electrical engineering are foreign students. 98%. So out of every 100 graduates, 2 Americans graduate. 98% are foreign students. And yet we can't even hire those people until they go home. And we were told by the IT Council in Washington, every project like the iPhone, for instance, or the iPad. I'm not promoting Apple, just any product.
Yes.
Okay? They want a PhD in electrical engineering in charge of that project. And they told us, if they're not here, we're going where they are.
Yep.
And if we have to move our whole company to where those PhDs are, we're going to move them.
So you often hear, Congressman, an idea, something along the lines of we ought to staple a green card or a work visa
Pretty
or
dang
something to every college diploma to enable many of those folks to stay
Every
here.
graduate degree diploma for sure.
Right. Before we get into the political aspects of this, which I swear I will come to here quickly, I want to ask you about 2 more things. First of all, a lot of people heard during the tragedy in Boston that the Tsarnaev brothers were legal permanent residents, and they thought, okay, there goes immigration reform. That the concerns about border security translate into a concern about homeland security, certainly not equating northern migration from Mexico or South America with what happened in Boston, but the understanding that people are concerned about who is crossing the border illegally, but also who's crossing into this country even legally. Can you talk a bit about whether we should be concerned from a homeland security standpoint about any of these issues, or is that just an issue raised by those who wish to undercut immigration reform in the main?
You know, we are blessed so far that the terrorists that we've received into this country didn't sneak into the country across our southern or northern border.
Yep.
They came in here and become overstays, which basically, overstays are just like the people that cross the border illegally in Texas.
Right.
Once you're here and you've gone past the time you're legal here, you are an illegal immigrant at that point in time. Yep. They've been overstays. Are these folks who came in possibly under false pretense looking for some kind of asylum from Chechnya? But anytime there's a homeland security failure, there's no doubt that there's an X number of people in this country, and it's a large number, who that fear factor multiplies by the numbers, the sheer numbers that come across our southern border.
Yep.
And they are afraid what's in those numbers. Now, do we have any evidence so far that there's anything in those numbers? I would argue no.
Right.
But is there? Do we know?
Right.
Those of us who live close to the border have heard all the stories. I know you've heard the stories. Training camps in northern Mexico. Other than Mexicans coming in and disguising their ethnicity to come in, people from the Middle East. You hear those stories. Well, Border Patrol will tell you that some of those stories are true. So will ICE. But so far, that hadn't been somebody that blew us up or flew an airplane into a building. Praise God for that.
And not enough, Congressman, to derail the efforts.
And I think,
yeah.
Look, when the attack occurred against our innocent citizens in Boston, Congressman Carter went back to his Homeland Security Appropriations Committee to get to work to make sure that didn't happen again.
Yep.
I went back to the Select Committee on Intelligence to hear from the FBI and others about how we weren't going to allow it. We went back to fix the problem, not to scapegoat a group of people for the problem. That's part of the problem in America. In America, your taxes too high, it's those immigrants. Crime, immigrants, right?
Health care problems,
immigrants.
Yeah, right,
Health care costs too much, immigrants.
Right.
Without looking, here's what we did. We worked that Monday, we worked that Tuesday, we worked that Wednesday, and we talked. We spoke on that Thursday. We continued to work. And last Monday, I was with Paul Ryan in Chicago at the City Club, where he came to make a presentation. And what did Congressman Ryan, the vice presidential candidate, right? I mean, let's put him in perspective, everybody.
Right.
The guy that this November 6th passed was the vice presidential candidate. What did he say? He says, it means we need to get the work done even quicker. Because $18 billion we spend as a nation on immigration enforcement, $18 billion. I want you to know, that's more than you spend on the FBI, on all of them. DEA, Secret Service, right? To do what? To deport mostly people who came here to do no harm and who have been here more than 10 years, a third of them more than 15 years, who have millions of American citizen children? Let's take that $18 billion, let's register the 11 million, bring them out of the shadows, register them with the government. Now we have a smaller pool of people to look after with those $18 billion and go after the really bad guys. That's going to make you safe. That's going to make you more secure as Americans.
Okay. Congressman Gutierrez has mentioned a couple times the children of undocumented persons who are here. This is itself sort of a sub-issue that has been a flashpoint. It goes back into the presidential campaign. Remember Rick Perry getting booed at that debate during the presidential campaign for talking about in-state tuition for the children of undocumented persons favorably. Where are we on this issue? Where are we on the DREAM Act? Where are you on the DREAM Act? Where should we be on the specific question of, as Ken Starr, the president of Baylor University, good Republican, going back many years, wrote in the Express News recently, these are kids who are here only for opportunity. They didn't commit a crime. We should treat them fairly and not give them a hard time for doing something that it was not their fault. What about that?
Without going into the details of our bill, I can just tell you that I think that any bill that comes to the floor or to the committee system for consideration will take the Dreamers into consideration.
We'll address the question.
Absolutely.
Without going into particulars of what you're going to do.
We won't go into the details. It will address.
But we'll address the issue.
And I think what is really good about this moment, what's really exceptional, many things are good about this. What's exceptional is that we had this discourse in our pro-immigrant community, right? And it said, well, the young people didn't do anything wrong, and that therefore we should allow legislation. Well, if they didn't do anything wrong, then it kind of said that somebody who brought them did something wrong.
Right.
And so there was that duality in the argument. Well, let me tell you, I go across this country and dreamers don't talk about themselves anymore. They talk about their moms and their dads.
Right.
Everywhere I go across this country to organize for comprehensive immigration reform, here's what people say: we want them all. Now the dreamers are talking about their moms and their dads, their aunts and their uncles,
Right.
their families. And so I think we're in a much better place today because of that. But obviously they did an exceptional job of making us understand who they were and their contributions. And we will take that into consideration as we move legislation forward.
Congressman, let me ask you about the political realities of this. So I remember back to 06 and 07 when President George W. Bush attempted to pass immigration reform and was unable to do so. Objections from his right largely were responsible for this not passing. It is easy to be cynical and say that Romney and Ryan getting 27% of the Latino vote in November is the spur that has caused immigration reform to go back to the head of the line, and that without the outcome of the 2012 election, we would not be having this conversation. Would you disabuse me of that idea?
It's part of it, absolutely. I'd be a hypocrite to say it wasn't part of it.
Yeah.
It's not part of my decision on this,
No.
but it's part of some people's decision on this.
Yeah.
The other question that's going to be asked, if you don't ask it, is, okay, so what are you doing? You're importing 11 million Democrat voters? Well, I don't agree with that.
Well, we know in Texas, not every Latino voter is a Democrat.
I think that the Latino community, my neighbors that I know, they believe in the Protestant work ethic, if you will. They believe in entrepreneurship. They believe in small business. There are more small businesses created in our state last year by Hispanics than by any other single group in the entire country.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I get astonished is
So
that
free enterprise will bring our share to the Republican Party.
Right.
I have to tell you, I'm particularly proud of the Latino voter and the immigrant voter in this last election, because you take a community of people who are citizens of the United States.
Right.
Most of them born here in the United States. Because people think of Latinos and they think of undocumented workers, of people that are illegally here. Well, 90% of us are legally here, right? 70% of us were born here. I mean, that's who we are. We are, by and large, citizens of the United States of America. Having said that, they came out and voted in record numbers. And here's what I think the message they said. They said, if you're going to use Latinos and immigrants as scapegoats, and you're going to finger point, then you don't pass a certain threshold of a decency test, right? I'm not going to listen to you on economics. I'm not going to listen to you on the environment. I'm not going to listen to you on foreign policy. I'm not going to listen to you on all these other issues because you didn't pass the basic decency test on the issue of how you treat the most vulnerable among us. I'm pretty proud that people who have all the rights and prerogatives of American citizenship said, you know what? I'm going to vote for somebody that's lower on the ladder. I'm going to remember the tradition that brought me here to America, and I'm going to help others rise, right? Instead of simply looking at mine. I think they voted that way. But let me also say that Congressman Carter, and I know Congressman Ryan saw me in the gym the week after he lost. He knew I did everything I could to stop him from becoming vice president. Did he come up to me with anger or some disdain? He put his hand down. He said, Luis, I want to work, but I don't want to work with you. This is what Congressman Ryan said. I don't want to do it because it's the political thing to do. I want to do it because it's the right thing to do. And he said, Luis, you and I as Catholics can never allow a permanent underclass of Americans to exist in America. And that's the tradition that brought us together last week in Chicago.
Well,
and so it doesn't, to me, I don't care how they came to the table. I'm just happy that a table that I used to organize back 15 years ago, and I'd have 20 chairs, and it'd be me and be like 16 extra. Ahora la gente me invitan a mí, ni hay asiento para mí, because they already got everything organized. That's pretty good, right? I just said that. I called meetings now, and everybody's organized. And they said, Luis, we didn't save you a seat. And I kind of go, good, that means I did my job, right? Because there are others engaged in getting this done. And let me just say, in terms of that, I want to say, because our colleague is here, Congressman Doggett is here, Congressman Doggett has been a longtime staunch supporter of immigrants and pro-immigrant policy. And I want to say one other thing, that the new congressman from San Antonio, Congressman Castro, what a breath of fresh air. He's smart and he's mature beyond his years. And I am so thankful to all of you. You should clap for yourself if you sent him to the Congress of the United States, because he's going to make a difference. People like him and Gallegos and Vela and Ruiz and all the new members of the Hispanic Congressional Caucus, what a great group of people coming to fight for immigrants. And I'm just so happy you sent them out my way to the Congress of the United States.
Okay, let's now turn this over to the audience to have questions. We could go on longer. We're just going to let you all, if you would, microphones on either side. And Eddie, somebody, you or Ashley, will keep an eye on the time so that we don't go over, because we want to let these guys get on to their next, and their next, and their next. I would be very happy to have you join us in the conversation. I'm going to respect this woman first, and then I'm going to come over there. We'll try to go back and forth. Ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Esther Reyes. I live and work in Austin, Texas. And before I ask my question, just in honor and in remembrance, I always like to put the human face to whatever issue we're talking about. Last week I was here in San Antonio at the USCIS office. A mother of 2 U.S. citizen children, a 2-month-old and a 4-year-old, was forced to leave the country the following day. We did everything we could. Now her 2 U.S. citizen children are in Mexico with her right now because she refused to leave them here. Now we have 2 daughters who are living under constant fear of the danger that's happening right now in Mexico, who are not going to be having that access to education, to health care, a baby, a 2-month infant. And so just in honor of her, you know, I want to bring that human face to this issue. It was something that we did everything we could, tried to push for prosecutorial discretion, tried everything we could possibly do, reach out to the public advocate, reach out to our congressperson. Anyway.
You have a question.
Yes, my question. So Congressman Gutierrez mentioned that right now our enforcement agency, the amount that we spend on enforcement is more than the other agencies, law enforcement agencies combined. Now, I was raised in a border community. How do we bring accountability to that huge agency that, unfortunately, whether it's inappropriate use of lethal force or rampant and widespread racial profiling, how do we ensure that the American values of transparency and accountability are brought to that?
What about that, Congressman?
Well, I think, first of all, it's part of the reason you need comprehensive immigration reform. Look, the first protection against racial profiling and against discrimination and bigotry is what? Is having an identification that says you are legally admitted to the United States of America and that you're here. That ends the conversation pretty quickly and moves that enforcement agent on to real crime. So if that's what's on his mind. I don't get stopped in Chicago because I'm a member of Congress. I don't get stopped in Chicago because I don't violate the law and the cops aren't looking particularly for somebody that looks like me. That wasn't always the case in Chicago as I grew up, I assure you, in the 50s and the 60s. And maybe sometimes as a youth I deserved to get a second look at by the police, but not usually. So having said that, you know, these are things that we need to overcome. Now, if we fix our immigration system, we bring 11 million people out of the shadows, and then, look, I think America is learning, and we're all learning. And part of the conversation that Congressman Carter and I are having here today with you, I think it's an educational experience, not only for us, but for the rest of the American people. If they can hear a Republican and a Democrat speak in sensible terms, then I think that goes all the way down to the local police officer or constable who is also going to change his mind in terms of how he views his function in terms of keeping us safe.
Please.
Charles Foster, this is for Congressman Carter. Congressman, I think Speaker Boehner has been very positive in everything he said. Do you think Speaker Boehner and will his caucus support him allow a straight-up vote in the House on the final version of the immigration bill, or will he apply the hazard rule?
Right. Will there be the majority of the majority test that we've heard so much about?
I think Speaker Boehner is going to allow this bill to come to the floor, and we hope it'll be the majority, but we don't know. We went into this whole project saying that there's X number of people on both sides of the aisle that are not going to vote for immigration reform no matter what. Take those out and see what we have left to get this passed. That's probably what's going to happen.
So if this bill passed largely with Democrats and some Republicans, you'd be okay with that?
I don't think it'll pass that way. I think it'll pass fairly close to
a more bipartisan
I do.
outcome.
Sam Johnson and I started this mess, okay? Okay, 3.5 years ago, Sam Johnson from Plano, a Republican, and John Carter, the speaker said, if we get two of the most radical conservatives to go on immigration, we're bound to be able to get the Democrats to send some of their liberals. And that's what we did.
Right.
We have been endorsed quietly by Speaker Boehner as by Nancy Pelosi. So both sides have checked with their leadership. We are not governed by our leadership. Do we not have instructions from our, at least I know our side doesn't.
Neither do I.
And their side says they don't. We are on our own. But I feel confident the Speaker's going to take it forward. Now, is it going to be regular order? Yes, it is. That means we got to get past the Judiciary Committee, which is a really fierce committee. And we're going to have real battles at Judiciary.
Right. Okay.
And was part of the reason I left financial services after 20 years to join the judiciary, because I figured that's where everything was going.
That's
and that's
the
where
action.
we needed
Yeah.
people to be. I mean, I love my job over on financial services. Hope to go back to it in a couple of years after we've settled this. But right now, I want to be on judiciary where something is happening, and you can look. There's got to be somebody. You know, it's like Gowdy's there. You know, from South Carolina, conservative. He's the chairman of the subcommittee on immigration. Luis Gutierrez is there from Chicago. But we're talking to one another, and that's the first thing you have to have is a conversation. There are going to be those that are going to throw bombs at us from the outside, and they're going to try to blow up the deal. They are going to try to do that.
It's already happening, yeah.
And they're already attempting to do that, you know? And then it's going to take. And look, people like me and others who have combed every inch of this country for comprehensive immigration reform have to understand it can't all be about applause. You know, we're going to have to go out there and be able to receive some criticism, because I assure you, after this bill is presented, I will receive criticism. And so will my friend Carter. Just look what's happening in the Senate, right? Yeah. We will receive criticism. But you know, at the end, we didn't go there to win a popularity contest. We went there to make lives of Americans safer and better. So that criticism will probably come as part of the course.
Okay. Ma'am.
Yes, my name is Monica Weisberg Stewart. I'm a businesswoman in McAllen, Texas, and the chair of the Immigration and Border Security Committee for the Texas Border Coalition. A couple of concerns. First, I'd like to commend you all for coming together as a bipartisan fashion. Second of all, we continuously see a problem of constantly putting the cart before the horse. For example, E-Verify. Do you intend to be able to fix these programs before you put them into place? At our ports of entry, we're 6,000 manpower short and $6 billion short in infrastructure, technology, and manpower.
Okay.
Those terrorists came in through this country through our ports of entry. So to us, we're very highly concerned of border security at our ports of entry, and very concerned about these programs being implemented before the programs are in place in order to substantiate them.
All right, let's ask about that. So do you put them in place and then fix them as you go, or do you wait until there's something closer to perfect, Congressman Carter?
This is a debate that we've had on the committee as we've worked together. Our hope is we will do things semi-simultaneously. Now, that's about as good as I can put it, semi-simultaneously. But the reality is E-Verify and a border exit program, both of which are difficult. And they're not going to, you can't do those in 6 months. So, and yet, we have the guest worker program and the other things in order to get this whole thing rolling. We're playing with those time schedules right now. But the bottom line is, those polls they'll tell you about, it is about the economy, it is about families, it is about a lot of things, but it's also about the fear factor of the American people on the unsafe borders. And the young lady asked the question about, the border. Luis was talking about the Border Patrol and how much money we spend on it. Well, when the Border Patrol sees somebody coming out of the river, they don't know absolutely for sure whether that's an economic guy looking for a job or that what's in his backpack is 25 pounds of marijuana and the spotters on the other side of the river ready to shoot the first Border Patrolman that gets in his way. They have a tough job.
Absolutely.
So let's be fair to law enforcement. and say they're profiling, they're basically trying to turn back anybody that comes across that border. And hopefully, they're trying, it's just as much about law enforcement as about immigration.
60 million Americans apply for a new job every year, 60 million. So that's 60 million verifications. And you got to verify everybody,
Right.
down to the sole employer. So I think the way you do it is you start, number one, with government that has an infrastructure already in place. And you start with big companies, you know? I mean, you got General Motors and those companies that are already big because they have HR departments that can
Right.
handle these things. And then it's not going to happen in 1 year. You're not going to verify everybody
Can't
in
be
1
overnight,
year.
yeah.
No
You're going to do
way.
1 year, you're going to do certain sectors of our economy. The second year, next section. And then you're going to go down to the guy that has 10 employees to the guy that's a sole proprietor. So it'll take 4, 5, 6 years before you fully implement a verification system. But you start little by little because you're right, you have to check. Because, I mean, if it's you and you're going for that job and you really want that job and you're qualified for that job and the government gives you a false positive, you know, a negative and says no, and you don't get that job, there's got to be consequences. We need a system that's going to work, too.
Right. I am being told, I'm afraid, questioners by our hosts. One last question, I'm sorry, before we let these guys go. Gentlemen.
Yeah, my name's Brad Bailey, and I first want to commend both
Mr.
of you
Bailey.
for taking on this issue. Judge Carter, I know how difficult it is being a Republican my whole life. You know, taking on this issue is not easy. Congressman Gutierrez, you're fearless, and your leadership is so needed in this issue, and I think you're really one of the important parts that keeps this together. But as someone that's talked about this issue with many Republican clubs and conservatives across the state, I can tell you the biggest fear that everyone hears is that this is a policy issue, but so many people in the grassroots fear it's a political issue. And they fear that it's going to get so far along that at the end the president is going to veto it or not take it on and make Republicans look bad, because as long as this albatross is over the Republicans' neck,
Right.
we're going to continue to drown ourselves.
All right.
How do you keep the labor unions, you know, the guest worker bill, the way it came out in the Senate,
Right.
with 15,000 guest workers from the construction industry? We need 15,000 in San Antonio right now.
Right.
You know, how do we take on those issues and take the extremist groups on each side, the labor unions and the anti-immigration crazies, and say, let's do what's right for America? And I think that you're going to be a big part
And
of
how
it.
do you assure that the president's motives are pure? To Mr. Bailey's point, not the first person to raise the question that the president benefits politically if this goes down and he pins it on Republicans.
Look, I think everybody knows that whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, I will raise my voice if I think people are playing partisan political politics with the future of millions of undocumented workers here in this country who I believe deserve a chance.
Yep.
And I'm not going to let anybody get in the way of that. All I can tell you is that I'm not going to do it. I don't believe my colleagues that are working with Congressman Carter are going to do that. I know I walk in the room and I got a good reputation as fair person and a trustworthy person. I bet you Congressman Carter will say that about, and I want to keep that. His opinion of me is something of value to me, and I'm going to make sure I keep that opinion of him high, and the opinion of the rest of the American people high in terms of what we do. Look, the president has to be out there using the bully pulpit to continue to raise the issue of immigration reform. That's his job, right? But he also has to understand that his moment to be the sole leader on immigration has passed. That now it's a moment for he and Carter and I and Democrats and Republicans in the Senate and the House working together to get this issue done. And I think that there are those of us that are going to continue to tell the president exactly that. We love him. We reelected him. I'm happy he's there, and I look forward to working with him to get it done. But I'm also going to be respectful of the time of my colleagues and the courage that they show in coming to the table to fix our broken immigration system.
Mr. Carter, last
I'm
word.
glad that we got that question, because I know that when we were talking about the outside groups that are opposed to this bill, a lot of people were thinking about the conservative groups. But let me tell you, the labor unions are very much opposed to immigration reform. They are vocally opposed to it. They are working within number crunching, but they're just as much out there as Heritage Action and some of the other people. So that was a good point you made. Yes, that fear is out there. Among Republican circles, their fear is the president's setting you up, and you're going to stick your neck out, and when it's all over with, they're going to beat you and every other every Republican because they're going to blame you for killing immigration reform.
Here's something we can
And
all
here's
leave.
what I say. I'm kind of like Davy Crockett. They can go to hell, I'm going to Texas.
Well, let me say to my friends, continue applauding and clapping. Why don't, there's these wonderful people that have set this table, cooked this food for us, and set this meal,
Yeah.
and they're going to pick it up. Let's give them a round of applause
Okay, very
for the
good.
wonderful meal that they put before us.
And let's give Congressman Gutierrez and Congressman Carter applause, not just for the substance, but for their civility in talking about this very important topic. Thank you very much. Eddie, all you guys, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Congressman.